It sits like a jagged concrete scar in the middle of the San Francisco Bay. Surrounded by freezing, turbulent waters and suffocating fog, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary was never just a prison. It was the ultimate symbol of the United States government's uncompromising power. It was a place designed not to rehabilitate, but to break men. For decades, it stood unchallenged, backed by a terrifying myth: no one escapes the rock. But on one silent night in June 1962, that illusion of absolute control was shattered forever. 3 men vanished into the dark, leaving behind nothing but dummy heads in their beds and a mystery that would consume the world for more than half a century. The official narrative was swift and absolute. The authorities, desperate to protect the prison's infallible reputation, declared that the men had succumbed to the frigid waters, swallowed entirely by the bay. For decades, the story was treated as a closed case, a tragic, foolish end for desperate criminals. But science is an unforgiving adversary to myth. Now, thanks to the unprecedented convergence of DNA analysis, advanced hydrodynamic modeling, and cutting-edge artificial intelligence, the narrative has fundamentally shifted. This isn't just a story about a prison breakout. It is the story of how 60 years later, modern science finally proved that the greatest prison break in American history was an absolute success. To understand the sheer magnitude of this escape, you must first understand the beast that was Alcatraz. Converted into a maximum security federal prison in 1934, it was the end of the line. If you broke the rules on the outside, you went to prison. If you broke the rules in prison, you were sent to Alcatraz. The facility was an unparalleled feat of psychological control. Prisoners were subjected to head counts up to 13 times a day. Metal detectors, tear gas canisters, and armed guards in elevated gun galleries watched every movement. But the prison's ultimate weapon was its geography. The treacherous currents and the 50-degree Fahrenheit water made the bay an unbreachable final barrier. Over its history, 36 men were involved in 14 recorded escape attempts. Most were captured, some were shot dead, and a few vanished into the waves, presumed drowned. To attempt an escape was universally considered a death warrant. That invulnerability came under terminal stress with the arrival of Frank Lee Morris and 2 brothers, John and Clarence Anglin. These were not ordinary inmates relying on brute force. Morris possessed a brilliant, calculating mind, while the Anglin brothers brought unmatched resourcefulness learned from a childhood of survival in rural Florida. Placed in adjacent cells, they formed a highly specialized team. Their plan exploited a microscopic weakness in the inescapable fortress: salt damage. Decades of relentless sea air had degraded the concrete behind the small air vents in their cells. Over the course of many months, the team chipped away at the crumbling walls using stolen metal spoons, discarded saw blades, and a homemade drill cobbled together from a stolen vacuum cleaner motor. To hide their agonizingly slow progress, they crafted fake vent grills out of painted cardboard. By day, the cells looked entirely normal. By night, they were active excavation zones. To cover the mechanical grinding of their drill, Morris utilized the daily music hour, playing his accordion loudly to mask the sound of concrete being pulverized. But breaking through the wall was only the first step. They needed hours to get off the island, which meant beating the guards' nightly visual head counts. The solution was a masterclass in psychological deception. The men sculpted incredibly lifelike dummy heads using a mixture of soap, concrete dust, and toilet paper. They painted them with flesh tones and glued real human hair, swept up from the prison barbershop floor to the scalps. Placed on their pillows, with clothes bundled beneath the blankets, the illusion was flawless. Once the holes behind their sinks were large enough, the men squeezed into an unguarded utility corridor, climbing plumbing pipes to a cavernous, empty upper level. Here they established a secret workshop. Surviving the bay required flotation. Over months, they systematically stole more than 50 rubberized prison raincoats. Using smuggled thread, they stitched the coats together into a massive pontoon raft. To make the seams watertight, they pressed the rubber against the prison's exposed hot steam pipes, vulcanizing the material. On the night of June 11th, 1962, the plan was set into motion. They climbed to the roof, pried off a ventilation shaft cover, and slipped out into the freezing night. They made their way to the rocky shore, inflated their raincoat raft with a modified musical concertina, and vanished into the fog. The next morning, the guards discovered the dummy heads. The prison went into lockdown, and one of the largest manhunts in American history began. Tantalizing but inconclusive clues bobbed to the surface of the bay: a wooden paddle, a sealed waterproof parcel containing the Anglin's personal photos, and a deflated life jacket. But no bodies were ever found. A year later, in 1963, a human femur bone washed ashore on Point Reyes, north of San Francisco. For the FBI and prison authorities, this was the convenient closure they needed. Assuming the remains belonged to the drowned escapees, the official narrative was cemented. In 1979, the FBI officially closed the case, declaring the trio legally dead. The myth of Alcatraz was preserved. But as the decades passed, scientific capabilities evolved. Researchers and forensic experts began to look at the cold case not with speculation, but with data. The first major blow to the FBI's official story came from the realm of physics and oceanography. For years, experts claimed the chaotic currents of the bay would have inevitably swept the men out to the deadly open ocean. However, in 2014, a team of researchers from Delft University in the Netherlands decided to test this theory. They utilized highly advanced 3D hydrodynamic computer modeling to reconstruct the exact tidal conditions of San Francisco Bay on the night of June 11, 1962. By inputting historical tide data, water levels, and wind patterns, they ran dozens of digital simulations. The results were staggering. The researchers discovered an incredibly narrow window of opportunity. If the men had launched their raft exactly at midnight, the shifting currents would have acted as a perfect conveyor belt, pushing their raft safely toward the Marin Headlands, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. If they left earlier or later, they would have perished. Given Morris's meticulous planning, it is highly probable they monitored the tides and timed their departure perfectly. The science proved that surviving the bay was not a miracle. It was simply a matter of precise timing. But what about the physical evidence? What about the bones that supposedly proved they died? In 2015, forensic scientists decided to revisit the femur bone discovered in 1963, which the FBI had long used as the unofficial proof of the escapees' demise. Using modern DNA extraction techniques that did not exist during the original investigation, scientists successfully pulled a genetic profile from the degraded bone. They then acquired a DNA sample from a living maternal relative of the Anglin brothers. The results were definitive and undeniable. There was absolutely no match. The bones found in the bay did not belong to John or Clarence Anglin, nor did they belong to Frank Morris. The only physical evidence grounding the government's drowning theory had just been scientifically dismantled. With the tidal models proving they could survive, and the DNA proving they didn't wash ashore dead, a legendary piece of family lore suddenly took on massive new importance. For decades, the Anglin family had claimed the brothers survived. They received unsigned Christmas cards for years, but their most compelling piece of evidence was a photograph provided by a family friend named Fred Brizzi. Brizzi claimed that in 1975, while traveling in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, he bumped into John and Clarence Anglin. He took a photograph of two men wearing sunglasses, standing by a road on a farm. For years, skeptics dismissed the photo as an unverified rumor, a trick of the light, or simply two men who happened to share a passing resemblance to the fugitives. Then came 2020. Enter Iden TV, an Ireland-based technology company specializing in advanced artificial intelligence and facial recognition systems. Iden TV's algorithms are powered by deep neural networks, the same highly classified technology utilized by state intelligence agencies to identify suspects in crowded areas. Researchers fed the 1975 Brazil photograph into the AI system, comparing the faces of the men in the picture directly to the 1960 Alcatraz mugshots of John and Clarence Anglin. The algorithm didn't just look at their general appearance. It analyzed immutable biometric data. It measured the exact spatial geometry of their faces, the distance between the pupils, the specific angles of their cheekbones, the shape of the jawlines, and the unique curvature of their ears. These are biological markers that do not change with age, weight gain, or even minor surgeries. The results sent shockwaves through the investigative community. The algorithm confirmed a 99.7% match for both men. In the scientific and biometric community, a 99.7% certainty is considered an absolute definitive match. According to the state-of-the-art artificial intelligence, the men standing on that farm in Brazil, 13 years after vanishing into the freezing fog of San Francisco Bay, were undeniably John and Clarence Anglin. The escape from Alcatraz is no longer a riddle wrapped in government speculation and folklore. It is a testament to human ingenuity validated by modern technology. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers didn't just break out of a prison, they broke a national myth. They exposed the profound vulnerabilities of an institution built on absolute control, utilizing extreme patience, stolen spoons, and human hair to outsmart the highest security the 1960s had to offer. While authorities maintain an active warrant for the escapees, the convergence of modern forensics and AI has breathed new life into the decades-old investigation. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's greatest mysteries, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories.